When we think of liberty, we usually picture these grand documents, right?
Yeah.
Complex legal systems, rights carved into marble. It all feels very abstract
Right.
and political.
Right.
But what if that whole framework is, I don't know, incomplete? What if freedom is actually something far more demanding, something rooted not in law, but in relationship?
And that tension is exactly what we're digging into today. The gap between the political complexity we associate with freedom and this radical simplicity the author presents.
Yeah.
We're pulling some really profound excerpts from the work, The Practice of Love and Collective Liberty by Farah A.
And our mission for you today is pretty direct. We want to cut through the noise and really analyze the powerful language Farah A uses to redefine this whole concept.
It's very evocative.
It really is. We're talking about phrases like blood-written pages, the idea of freedom as an ornate gift, and this almost revolutionary conclusion that it all boils down to one thing. Freedom is the practice of love.
And in doing that, we're really challenging the assumptions you might have about where freedom even comes from and, more importantly, what it actually requires of you to sustain it.
Okay, so let's start where the text starts, with a rejection. Farah A tells us what freedom isn't long before she tells us what it is.
Right.
And the first thing she throws out is this idea that freedom is some complex, ornate gift.
And those words, complex and ornate, they're chosen so carefully. Complex suggests, that you need a special class of people to manage it for you.
Yeah.
It puts it out of reach.
And ornate, that one really gets me. An ornate gift is something you just receive. You admire it.
You put it on a shelf.
Exactly. It's beautiful, maybe, but it's not essential for your survival. It lets you stand back, nod, and just assume the job is done.
It's the difference between admiring a painting on the wall and actually building the house the painting is in.
Mm-hmm.
One is passive, the other requires constant work. By calling it ornate, she's saying that all those mechanisms we think of, constitutions, laws, they are the freedom itself. They're just the decoration on top of it.
And she pushes this even further. She says freedom is not handed down or bestowed as charity upon a nation. That's a really sharp political point.
Oh, it's huge. Because charity is, by its very nature, a top-down transaction. It's hierarchical.
There's a giver and a receiver.
Precisely.
Yeah.
A powerful entity has the freedom, and it decides to grant it to a less powerful one, the people. And that implies you should be grateful, that you're dependent, and that it can be taken away.
So by rejecting it as charity, she's saying real freedom can't flow from a powerful source down to the people. It has to be generated from within.
It has to be non-hierarchical. It has to come from the people themselves.
So if we put those two rejections together, it's not a gift, it's not charity. What's the immediate takeaway for the citizen, for you listening?
I think the single biggest implication is the non-negotiability of effort. If it isn't given to you, you have to earn it. And if it isn't a static object, you have to constantly maintain it.
So participation isn't optional.
It's the absolute prerequisite. The work is never done, which is a challenging idea.
And to back all this up, she doesn't turn to abstract philosophy. She turns to the past and says, the blood-written pages of history bear witness.
Wow. I mean, that phrase alone, blood-written pages, it just stops you cold.
It's so visceral. It's not just history shows us this or studies indicate. It's saying the proof, the actual record of liberty is tied to sacrifice.
To struggle, to a tangible physical cost.
Yeah. The moments freedom was actually won weren't quiet negotiations. They were moments of profound collective effort and pain.
And that connects right back to our first point. History, when you look at it this way, offers zero support for freedom being a passive gift. If the ink is blood, then a heavy price was paid by people who refuse to just sit back.
It almost gives us a way to measure freedom, doesn't it? If a country claims to be free but can't point to those moments of shared risk, of sacrifice,
Then maybe it's still just an ornate gift.
right, something that was granted and could just as easily be taken away, the real ownership comes from the struggle.
It also reframes how we should think about history. We're not just remembering events, we're remembering the price that was paid. It's like we're not inheriting wealth, we're inheriting a debt.
A debt to those who paid that price.
Exactly. And a debt that every generation has to keep repaying through their own effort.
So the history proves the point. True liberty requires this continuous, determined effort.
And once she's established that, once she's rejected passivity and backed it up with history, she can finally define what this active liberty actually is.
Which brings us to her definition, and it seems to come in two main parts that are woven together. The first is about the group. She says, freedom is a journey walked together. side by side with others.
The word journey there is so important. A journey isn't a destination. It's continuous movement. You know there will be obstacles. You know you need a shared direction.
You can't just stop and say, okay, we're here, we're free now.
Never. The journey is the point.
And the side by side with others part, that seems to completely eliminate the idea of the lone hero fighting for his own freedom.
It does. It says your freedom is fundamentally tangled up with the freedom of the person next to you.
So my liberty depends on your liberty.
And my stability depends on yours. It demands synchronization. It means we have to agree we're all responsible for keeping this thing moving forward, especially when we disagree.
Because if the person walking next to you stumbles or just decides to stop walking,
It doesn't just affect them. A gap opens up. The whole group is exposed, slowed down. The journey can't be sustained by a few strong people. It needs everybody.
and that leads right into the final, most profound part of the definition, the engine that powers this whole collective journey.
The core practice.
Freedom is the practice of love. Now, when you hear love in a political text, it can sound, I don't know, a little soft, maybe, a bit sentimental.
Sure, but after everything she's said, the blood-written pages, the hard journey, we know this can't be a sentimental kind of love. It has to be something tougher.
So let's break that phrase down, starting with the word practice. Why practice?
Well, what is a practice? It's something you do over and over again, deliberately. Think of a musician practicing scales or an athlete training.
It's not a one-time thing.
Exactly. And you have to keep doing it, because if you stop, you get worse.
Yeah.
Your skill fades. So freedom is never a finished product. It's never achieved. It can only be sustained through that constant daily effort.
Which means it's a generational thing, too. My freedom today is built on my parents' practice, and my children's freedom will depend on mine. It's an endless commitment.
And that commitment, that practice, has to be defined by love. But in this context, love isn't a feeling, it's action. It's solidarity.
Okay, so ground that for us. What does that kind of love actually look like in a society?
It looks like policy. It looks like choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's the willingness to make real sacrifices of your time, your comfort, maybe your resources, for the long-term good of the whole group.
So if a community on the other side of the country is struggling,
The practice of love says their struggle is your struggle, because their instability will eventually become your instability. It's about seeing their vulnerability as your own,
it's empathy as a political tool.
a required political tool. It means you design your rules and your economy to lift up everyone, especially the most vulnerable, not just to reward the people who are already strong. If you let things fragment, if everyone just looks out for themselves,
You're failing the practice.
you're failing the practice of love, and you are actively, deliberately letting freedom erode.
And that's the power of her definition, isn't it? You can have the most beautiful, ornate constitution in the world,
The perfect gift.
but without that active solidarity, that practice of love holding it all together, the document is just an empty promise.
Right. The bonds between people are what give the laws meaning. The moment we stop making sacrifices for each other, the journey grinds to a halt. The practice of love is that daily, difficult, frustrating work of maintaining those bonds.
So to synthesize this whole deep dive for you, the core argument from Farah A is both incredibly simple and incredibly demanding. Freedom isn't some complex gift you receive passively.
No, it's an active, collective journey that has been validated by history and is sustained by a continuous shared practice.
It completely flips the script. Freedom isn't granted by power. It's generated by people through mutual commitment.
It demands constant engagement, not just passive agreement.
Which leaves us with a really essential question for you to take away from this. If freedom is truly defined by this collective effort, this difficult practice of love, what are the immediate, tangible actions we need to prioritize right now in our own families, our communities, to make sure that journey continues? This goes way beyond just voting. It's about how you spend your time, your energy, your empathy.
And maybe even more pointedly, what are the consequences we see all around us when that practice is neglected? When solidarity and empathy start to erode? Think about the rise of cynicism, the collapse of trust in institutions, the fragmentation of society. Are those not the direct results of failing the practice of love?
Something to really think about the next time you hear someone talk about freedom as if it's just a legal document. The reality, according to this text, is much, much harder, and it demands so much more from every single one of us.